G'day guys, welcome back to Red Time for another episode. I'm Jared Barker. Jake Michaels joins me and we do have a really big episode for you guys today. But before we do jump into it, we would just like to say that we were shocked and saddened to hear of the passing of a friend of the industry, Sam Landsberger, earlier this week. And we would like to offer our sincere condolences to his friends, family, and to everyone who did know him. Our thoughts are with you.
Yeah, extremely saddened to hear that a couple of days ago. Fantastic journalist, fantastic guy, and yeah, the industry will not be the same from here on out. So yeah, as you said, thoughts go out to family, friends, colleagues, everyone that knew Sam. Terrible, terrible news.
Indeed, well said. As I said, we do have a lot to kick on with for today's episode, and I think the biggest story coming out of this week, Jake, is the fallout from Dan Houston and his bump on Isaac Rankin, which left him concussed. Now, he was handed a 5-match ban from the AFL Tribunal on Tuesday night. Port Adelaide will be appealing that decision tonight, so apologies if you are listening to this after the fact, but he was handed a 5-match ban, and what I'm interested to know is, do you think the 5 matches is fair? Do you think it's too harsh? Do you think it's just? Is it too light? What are your thoughts?
I'm going to throw it back on you. What do you think I'm going to say?
I asked you the question. I have no idea what you're going to say because I never know what you're ever going to say about anything.
I think it's too harsh. I really do. And people, I've spoken about this with 10 different people, and I feel like I've got 5 in one camp and 5 in the other. Yep. I'm in the it's too harsh camp, 5 weeks. Obviously, that means assuming the penalty's not going to be reduced tonight, his season's done.
Yep.
Even if Port play 4 finals, he won't play again until round 1 next year. I think that's an extreme penalty for something that's not a head-high hit. It's a legitimate bump. Yes, it's a strong hit, but if Rankin gets up and plays on, that's not even being looked at by the MRO. And that's the key part of this whole thing that I always struggle to wrap my head around. How can we have that bump be a 5-week suspension because Rankin was concussed from it? And we don't want to see concussion. I get that.
So the outcome over the action.
It's all outcome.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with the action. It's all outcome based. Because the same thing can happen. If Dan Houston can come back round 1 next year, they can play Adelaide in round 1 and he can do the exact same thing to Isaac Rankin again. Yeah. Exact same bump. And Rankin jumps up this time. He's not getting a 5-week. He's not getting a 1-week suspension.
Yeah.
So how can it be 5 here, nothing here? How many times do we see hard bumps? We see hard bumps all the time, and we celebrate the hard bumps. We celebrate them when there's no concussion. So it's just really, really frustrating that you can have 1 be 5 and then the same thing be 0. And there are such fine margins in it. I'm just really struggling to grasp it, and I don't like it.
There are inconsistencies, but the AFL did say if you do choose to bump, whether it's head high or not, and it causes a concussion, you do need to just pay for those consequences.
But it shouldn't be that way. It should be.
Whether it should or shouldn't, that is just what the AFL is working on.
I understand that, but I don't think it should be that way. I think it should be, if we want to say that action, that hard hit that has been celebrated for 100 years in football, we don't want that anymore. Okay, I disagree with it, and 90% of people that watch football are going to disagree with it too. But if they want to get rid of it, so be it. But then punish every single player that does it, not just the ones that end in a concussion, because they all can cause a concussion. They all can. Whether it's 1%, 5%, whatever percent do, they all can cause a concussion. So punish them all, and we won't have any players left.
Yeah. The only thing I will say is, where there's so much confusion is if anything is graded by the MRO as 3+ weeks, it gets directed to the tribunal and they get to make their decision based on their own discretion. So they gave him 5 weeks, but I don't think there's no clarity that tells us why it's 5 weeks. Like, what's the difference between something
It feels like pulling a number out of a hat almost.
Yeah, anything 3+ is under the tribunal guidelines and the table of offences, which we always see and talk about. 3+ is tribunal, but what's the difference between 4?
5,
what
6,
constitutes a 5 or a 6 or a 7? I think we do need more clarity from the AFL.
Yeah.
Whether this is right or wrong, not for me to say, but I think we want more clarity because then we would understand these decisions more. Why is it 5 weeks? Why was a previous bump from a different player 4 weeks? Why is it different to Jimmy Webster's, which was 7? They are different bumps, and all these indiscretions and incidents do need to be assessed on their own merits. They are all different, so you can see why they are given different suspension lengths, but I think we just want that clarity as an industry so that we can better understand why they come to those decisions.
Do players hold too much power in the player movement space?
They do. I think they do. It's the power needs to be a bit more balanced. I think right now it's leaning towards the players. I think it does need to be reined in a little bit and go back towards the clubs, and I will explain why. We just see it every off-season now, don't we? Players walking away from clubs, walking away from big contracts, and the big contracts is the thing here, right? So the long-term deals that a lot of players are signing these days, they're the ones that are fraught with danger, whether it's 5 years, 6 years, or 7-year deals that they're signing. The players are signing it, they're getting their money, they're getting their long-term security, which is great for them.
And things change.
Absolutely they do. The clubs get their security on the other end. Well, we've locked away this player for X amount of years. They get to then assess the rest of their playing list and the rest of their salary cap accordingly, knowing that they've locked away this player for, hypothetically, let's just say it's 6 years. Only for that player to then walk out and say, hey, the going's getting tough. Things are going pear-shaped. We're not a premiership contender anymore. I want to go home. Now, that's only one circumstance, and it is pretty circumstantial.
But it's a common...
It does happen. It does happen, which is what the issue is. However, I do understand when there are extenuating circumstances, it might be on compassionate grounds that a player leaves, or personal matters, or family issues that they do need to go home and deal with. That's okay, and I think clubs actually do a pretty good job with those mutual agreements when terminating those sort of contracts and allowing their players to actually go home. But that's when the clubs need more power. So, hey, we'll send you back to WA. You need to go home. That's absolutely fine. Shake hands, say thank you for everything. We will let you go home. But, mate,
we're taking the best
Fremantle's the team that can actually do the best deal for us.
You want to go to West Coast, but sorry, we're getting a better offer from Freo.
Absolutely.
You're breaking the contract, not us. We're the ones being penalised, so we're gonna take what is best for us.
That's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
So we'll send you back to Victoria. You get to go home. But, mate, St Kilda's the one that we're dealing with. Yeah. That's where you're playing.
You can't I want to go to Hawthorn or Carlton or whoever. You're all going to where we're getting the best. I agree 100%.
Request the state.
Yeah.
Stop requesting the club. Under those circumstances, that's when the clubs need more power.
Yeah.
And right now, that is where the players have way too much of a say.
Well, you're right. These contracts these 5-year, 6-year, whatever contracts, they don't seem to be worth the paper they're written on.
Not anymore, no.
And so then why sign them? Why do we have them?
For security.
But for who? For the player or for the club?
It's mainly for the player, and this is why they have so
why
much power
bother,
right now.
Why the clubs? Because the clubs can get screwed with these contracts, as we see all the time. And I don't want to pick on Shea Bolton, but because we don't know the full set of circumstances yet. But if the situation is, and I probably shouldn't even mention Shea Bolton's name, but if a player wants to do that, if a player is in premiership contention for 5-6 years, wins premierships, tastes success, all of a sudden you're at the other end.
Happy enough to sign the deal.
Happy enough to sign the deal knowing that you're going to stay there for X amount of years. And then when the going gets tough and you fall to the bottom end of the ladder, I want to go home. Well, I'm sorry. I don't like that. I don't agree with that at all.
It's circumstantial, as I said, but I think we're on the same page there. Hey, moving on. Adelaide midfielder Matt Crouch is under police investigation following a complaint from a Port Adelaide fan coming out of last week's showdown that Crouch flicked a hat off the supporter's head. This is all under investigation and is in the middle of an ongoing legal process, so not too much else we can say, but those are the facts right now. What's your takeaway on that incident?
I'm glad you've said all that. You've ticked all the boxes of things that we need to say to make sure that everything's squared off and covered.
Now you're off a leash.
I'm going to go into bat for Matt Crouch. Not just because I've always been a defender of the Crouch critics out there as a player, but for this incident here. This has to be one of the biggest non-stories of all time.
Well, it's a story.
But it shouldn't be. Yeah. So when I first heard about this, when a couple of days ago when this surfaced, I heard about it, but I hadn't before I read or saw anything. My first thought was the way it was being reported and spoken about. I thought Matt Crouch had punched a spectator in the face as he was walking off the field.
When you read the headline,
I honestly thought that's what had happened, and I thought, oh my God, he's not going to play for 12 months. He might never play again. And then you watch it, and then you see what actually happened, and you think, what is this peanut doing? As in the Port Adelaide fan screaming abuse over the fence, as Crouch and the Adelaide players are walking off the field. Now, I'm not saying that players should have a free license and reign to touch players' baseball caps or touch spectators, fans' hats, or any part of their body. Just
Correct.
as we say the same thing about you can't touch players at the stadium.
Works both ways, yeah.
Yeah, but what's this idiot really expect? Like, what do you expect if you're screaming abuse at somebody, whether you're doing it at a football game or you're doing it at a restaurant or on the street? If you're screaming abuse 30 centimeters away in someone's face, what do you really expect? There's like, I don't know what this guy... I'm so sick of people paying their $20 to get into the footy and thinking they can have free reign to do whatever they want. Whether they're abusing people, starting fights, whatever it is. You cannot just act like a total moron. And that's what this guy's done. And it's a waste of time that now he's coming out now sooking that he's been...
Assaulted.
He's been assaulted. And it's like, give me a spell. You have not been assaulted. You're trying to claim your few minutes of fame and trying to cash in when you're the one that's at fault here for wasting everyone's time. Give me a break, grow up, absolute non-story, totally ridiculous.
I don't have too much to add to that, but to that Port Adelaide fan, we hope your hat is okay and we hope that it is recovering during this difficult time.
Simon Goodwin said earlier this week that he wouldn't do what Alastair Clarkson did last week by naming players, including Melbourne's Jack Viney, who had just signed a new deal with the D's, as a potential target player during the trade period. Was Clarko out of line for those comments? And where do you sit when it comes to coaches talking about uncontracted players from other clubs in a trade sense?
Well, I've always advocated for players and coaches and people in the industry being as open and honest as they can be, especially when they talk to the media. Speak your mind, be honest, just speak your truths. And I just think we don't want them to be robots, right? That's what we all want. So
players or
them
coaches,
speaking,
yeah.
any of them, anyone involved in the game, we like it when they are a bit more open-minded and they can speak a bit more freely, as long as they don't cross a line and don't go too far. The question is whether this is too far. And actually, interestingly, I don't think it was with you. It might have been with Walshy while you were in Paris, Jake. But we did speak on this podcast about something similar in players meeting with opposition coaches during the season, meeting with their prospective employers when they are maybe looking to get a trade elsewhere. So I think it's okay, because if you're meeting a prospective employer, you need to know that that's the best place for you. I think
it happens in every other industry as well.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, footy's no different
So
to that. It is
yeah.
a business as well, and it should in some cases be treated as such. This is one of those cases, so that's okay. That happens more than we think. So this is sort of similar with Clarko. Speaking about players that he might think will help his North Melbourne list. The question and query that I have, again, I'm actually okay with him saying it because he's being open and honest, and as someone who has advocated for that and has to be okay with that, I'm not going to shut him down once he's done it. The issue isn't him saying it. I just question, is it in North Melbourne's best interest that he did go public with it? Was it a wise decision? Because then you might catch the player in question off guard. In this case, it might be Jack Viney. What if he thinks, mate, Clarko, we've had these discussions. I don't want that becoming public knowledge as well, just for him. What if it catches him off guard? What if he then questions his decision? Oh, maybe I don't want to join you. You've just thrown me under the bus here. That's the only thing where I'm like, well, maybe it's not wise for the coach of a club to say those things.
Yeah.
Not that it's necessarily a bad thing or an issue that he was public with it.
Yeah, I can see both.
I'm just a sucker for openness and honesty, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we spoke about this earlier in the year with
Sam Draper.
Draper, yeah, and we said he was getting crushed, and it's like, don't we want this?
Yeah.
This is what everyone cries out for, and then we complain.
Remember that there is a line not to cross, but it's deciding on where that line is, I guess.
Yeah. Now, the only thing I'll say before we move on, because I think I tend to agree with most of what you said too, is that Simon Goodwin wasn't like ultra critical of Alastair Clarkson.
No, just
he just said I wouldn't do that, and I think that's fair enough. I think that's totally fair. I think there's nothing wrong with doing it, and there's nothing wrong with not doing it. I think it's fine. I think it's a personal preference, and I hope that that's how the industry and fans and players and coaches can view it. I don't think it needs to be one's right, one's wrong. I think it can be just how you handle the situation.
Indeed. Hey, the Swans are well on top of the ladder and are all but secure in hosting a qualifying final now. Things have to go pretty bad for them not to be. If you're John Longmire, are you resting key players this week?
I am. 100%. No doubt about it. And I know people will say that rest, the rest is what the pre-finals buy for. This is not about rest. This is not about getting one extra week of rest, which really doesn't make that much difference this time of year when you're getting that other week next week anyway. This is about minimizing the risk of injury. Mm-hmm. Every time you play, every time you run out there with 22 other players alongside you, you all risk getting injured. That's a given. Look at Carlton over the last couple of weeks. You go from full strength to losing players, the Hawthorn game, even last week, against the Eagles as well. And all of a sudden you've got 8 key players injured. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Sydney. But if they lose one key player, that significantly hurts their chances of winning the premiership this year. I don't care what anyone says. They're going to finish top. It would take something extraordinary for them to not finish top. And even if that happened, they would finish second. And finishing second versus first really makes no difference. You're still hosting a qualifying final with the double chance, obviously, as well.
Puts them in a position where they can actually
afford
do those things. Yeah.
So people say, well, what would you do? Well, Chad Warner didn't play last week. I wouldn't even entertain the idea of him coming back.
So who else are you resting?
This way. I'm looking at Isaac Heaney and Errol Goulden. Like they are their three best players. I'm not playing them. I'm just not. Why would you play any of them this week, and one of them suffers a hamstring injury? They might not play.
It is the risk that you take when you do play any game of footy, as you said.
So why would you roll that dice when you have nothing to gain? They can't gain anything. And if you want to turn around and say, well, they haven't really been in form, they need to find form. Are they really going to find form in the last game of the season when they don't have anything to play for, when players aren't going to be going at 100%, when even if they do, then they've got the week off next week anyway where they don't have that momentum anymore? I just think there's so much risk in playing, and I'm not saying they need to do a Ross Lyon and take 14 players out. I would be looking at 3 or 4 of your most valuable players and saying, who can we simply not afford to miss a qualifying final or any final? And they're not playing. I'm sorry, they're not playing.
We did say last week that injuries are a reason, they're not an excuse. So maybe we should expect to see a couple of players miss this week with general soreness or managed.
The tricky part is as well, so once they're named, if I don't know what he's going to do. If he names...
they'll be thinking about it.
Yeah.
Players don't want to go into this week getting injured.
Yeah.
That's in the back of their mind. There's no doubt about that.
But if Longmire names, pretty much the same team that went out there last week, or Warner comes back, or whatever it is, the usual sort of lineup, the problem is you can't aside from subbing one player out, and you might get unlucky because you might need to use your sub for an injury for somebody else earlier in the game. But aside from the sub, it's hard to give players rest once they're playing. You can't just bring someone on the bench and say you can sit on the bench for the half. Like, it doesn't work like that. Now, you might be able to get away with playing Heaney kind of as a forward and giving him a bit of rest there, but I mean, you can get injured anywhere. I just don't think it's worth it. They have nothing to gain at all and everything to lose by playing them, and I wouldn't be playing them.
I don't disagree.
With 1 round to go, which coach of the current top 8 is under the most pressure?
Well, I don't think he's under extreme pressure. I just want to say that. But why I want to bring this club up, because he's done an awesome job to get this team to this position, to where they are right now. But I think they're arguably the flag favourites. They're arguably the best team in the competition. They arguably have the most talented list in the competition.
Carlton.
It's definitely not your Blue Baggers. They have the second highest percentage in the comp, and they still could miss the 8 if they lose this week, and that's the Western Bulldogs. I just think naturally, if that happens with that talented list that they have at their disposal, playing arguably the best footy in the comp, arguably the most informed team right now heading into finals, they could lose this week and miss the 8, and it could genuinely happen. And if that happens, naturally, a team of that quality misses out on finals. Naturally, there's going to be pressure on the coach. Whether he deserves it or not, I'm actually not too sure. As I said, I think he's done actually a pretty reasonable job to get them to this position. Second highest percentage in the comp actually tells you a lot about that team and what their capabilities are. As I said, naturally there's going to be pressure on him. It's such a big game for the club this week. We've seen them fail under similar circumstances throughout the last few seasons in these big games when there are these expectations. And so for that reason, I think there is a little bit of pressure. As I said, whether there should be or not, I really don't know because I think this is a really good footy team and it's such a highly competitive season that good teams potentially won't be playing finals this year. That's the reality of this season. They might be one of them. So for that reason, I think it's Bevo and the Dogs.
Yeah, I'm going a different coach, but similar sort of reasons. And like you said, I don't agree with this necessarily. But I think it's Ken Hinkley. And I said this to you and Matt earlier in the week, and I think that you kind of laughed a bit, but then when you think about it, it's not as crazy as it seems. I think it's on the board, 5% chance, not saying 50%, it's 5% chance, 1 in 20 shot. He has, the showdown last week was his last win, the last win he coaches as Port Adelaide coach. Now, sounds crazy, but just think about it for a second. So Freo this week, Freo's favourite. Like they're going to go over there. Freo will most likely be playing for a spot in the 8.
Yep.
They will have everything to play for.
Depends on what happens in the prior games.
It does, but so there is a bit of a caveat on that. But if Freo has something to play for,
Yep.
they are going to be giving their everything to be obviously making finals. So that's going to be a tough game. Either way, Freo's the favourite to win that game. Then there would be an away qualifying final against either the Giants or the Cats. They're not going to be favoured in that game. And if they lose that, it's probably Hawthorn, Bulldogs, Lions, Carlton the following week. And even in Adelaide, I think you can make a case for all of those teams beating them.
Any elimination finalists this year can absolutely beat Port Adelaide in the semi-final.
Yeah.
I don't think you're wrong.
So that's how they could potentially lose. So it's not crazy. None of those scenarios are crazy. In fact, they might be the outsider in all 3 games. And then if that happened, and that would have meant they've lost 6 of their last 7 finals, Port. And I think people will be starting to beat that drum of we need change. And I'm not saying I agree with it. I think Ken Hinkley's a fantastic coach. And if I was a club, I'd be putting my hand up to secure him. But at some point, how long can it go, whether it's 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, where we're really good in the regular season and we get to finals and we fall short
Especially
every
if
year.
it's straight sets losses again.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they look to do something just because of the amount of external pressure. So I think, as I said, I want to reiterate, I don't think it is likely. I wouldn't do it, but it's something that's on the board. I think there's a huge amount of pressure on Ken Hinkley and Bevo as well.
Yep. No, I agree with you there. Moving on to the Bombers, though, is it right for them to be giving Dyson Heppel a send-off game this week now that they're finally out of the finals equation officially?
Well, let me ask you this. Is Dyson Heppel in Essendon's best 23?
Potentially. I don't know. That's up to the coaches to decide.
Well, the coaches would say he's not because
last week he wasn't.
So what's changed? Last week he wasn't.
They're not in finals equation anymore. They can't make finals anymore.
But that doesn't matter. That doesn't change who's in your best 23. They haven't had 10 injuries.
Nothing will just change from a ladder sense.
He hasn't been a lock in their best 23 for 6 weeks. So the answer is no. And therefore, should he be playing? I don't think so. I know I might sound like the Grinch. I know a lot of people will disagree with me. I think every game's got to be earned. I don't care who you are, what you've done for the club. You've got to earn every game. And
to finish 10th instead of 11th, or is it really that important?
So I'm getting crushed because I said earlier in the week that Richmond should be doing everything they can to lose this week when they play Gold Coast.
Yeah.
12 months ago, we saw North Melbourne holding the number 1 draft pick, and they went and beat the Suns in the final round of the season and gave up the opportunity to draft Harley Reid. Richmond, there is no Harley Reid this year. It doesn't matter. Richmond cannot win this game. And people say, oh, that's tanking. You can't do that. You must try and do everything in your power to win every game. Now, with all due respect to Dyson Heppel, okay, if he is their 23rd or 24th or 25th best player, the gap is not that much. But by playing him, how's that any different? If you're playing your 25th best player instead of your 23rd best player, how is that not doing everything you can to win a game?
Well, it's not egregious because he's not that far away from being in the best team.
But the point is you're not doing everything you can.
Look, last week I agree with you last week. They were in finals contention last week and needed to pick their best team to win that game of footy to stay in the finals hunt. So I get why if the coaches didn't think he was in their best 23 last week, they picked a team that they thought was best fit to win that game of footy, then that's fine. He doesn't play. He doesn't get the send-off that their fans thought that he would have deserved in front of the home crowd. I was actually okay with that decision, but now that they're not in the finals race, footy, I think we do it well in footy and sort of celebrating.
But wouldn't you rather
I don't think Essendon fans are going to give one iota about them finishing 10th or 11th.
What's more beneficial to the club? Giving Dyson Heppel, and it's not about Dyson Heppel or Essendon, it's about anyone. It could be the same next year with Scott Pendlebury, it could be the same in 5 years with Patrick Cripps. I don't care who it is. What's more beneficial to the Bombers right now? Giving Dyson Heppel a farewell game or giving someone else on their list an opportunity to play who will be there next year, that will benefit them for next year and in the future? I think every game should be earned, and it shouldn't just be handed out. Don't care who it is. I know everyone will disagree with that, but I really do feel that way. And it's the same thing. You see players getting their first game and the excitement of getting it's the all of the work that goes in. And I think it shouldn't just end at once you get the first, you're guaranteed to keep playing. Every game's got to be earned every single time.
Fair enough, Jake. Thank you for coming in today. Some good calls from you today, some not so good ones as well, but I do thank you for coming in. To everyone at home as well, thank you for listening to today's episode. Make sure you put your tips in this week, enjoy the footy, and we'll speak to you all on the next episode.